Your lolly was kind enough to point out to me between videos that I'd been mispronouncing salve. I'd been saying it salve. It's salve. It's pronounced salve. So that's one of the horrible, horrible English things. Horribly pronounceable English words. So here you have this woman come and say, oh no, 40 princesses are held by 3 ogres in this castle far, far away. And if you're to think back a couple of chapters, you had knights who would go off and look for whatever. And you would have them just disappear for years, and then you would have people go out and look for them, and then other people go out and look for them. And you also had this strange aversion to map making. So nobody made maps. Everyone was totally against the idea of the maps, which is kind of weird because maps are incredibly useful things. But so they were against the idea of maps, and because he didn't have a map and she didn't know where it was, and she said, oh, it's some distance away. Which direction? Oh, well, the roads turn, and so one day it's this way and one day it's that way. And so her answers were completely useless. And it's like, oh, the castle disappears. Sometimes it's here and sometimes it's there and sometimes it's elsewhere. And, it's only when you find it, you find it. And he's like, she is so useless. And so here he is with the woman who pretty much useless. And with useless information, it's probably all lies, and he knows that. And she's like, why don't you trust me? I say I'm honest. And he's like, but does anyone else say you're honest? She's like, I say I'm honest, and I'm a person. He's like, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. But he just gives up. And he gets put together in his armor. And so here he is with the full plate mail. And I mean, big sheets of metal on top of chainmail on top of the padding. And that is a good way to protect yourself. But as he said, he can't get up onto the horse by himself. He needs a derrick, which is another word for a crane. So that derrick is a word for a crane. So it's something used to lift up things. So here you have this guy, and he's on his horse, and he had to be helped onto his horse. And of course, like Clarence said, the girl ends up going with him. Here he is, packed in all of this armor. He can't really move. He can't really do anything. And the girl climbs on, wraps her arms around him, and he's like, okay, I am off. And then the boys start mocking him. And he talks about the prophet in the olden times. And this is Elisha, the prophet, who was one of the prophets in Israel back in the day. 700 BC, give or take. Long time ago. Before Babylon and the Assyrians wiped out Israel. So this is long, long time ago. And anyway, so there was this prophet Elisha. And he was one of the big guys. He was one of the big prophets in the Old Testament. And he was bald. And there were these 40 kids who were mocking him for being bald. And he prayed to God, and 2 she-bears, so female bears, ran out of the woods and killed the kids because they mocked him for being bald. It's in the Bible. It's one of those stories that's like, okay, I'm not sure why this is in here, but it's in here. So you have, that's Elisha being mocked. And the author admitted that he did it when he was a kid as well. He mocked the president. So this type of thing goes on, and yeah, boys can be mean and rowdy and disrespectful, and that's part of growing up, is that, you learn that there are consequences for being disrespectful, but you try and fight your boundaries. Anyway, so here he is. He's setting off in this armor with a spear, and he probably doesn't know how to use the spear well. I mean, it's a pointy stick, but at the same time, it takes practice to hold it up and stab things with it with any accuracy or with any speed or with any skill. And because he's the knight on horseback, his mobility is limited to the horse. And he's going to have another problem coming up real soon because here it is, it's dawn. And eventually, in a couple of hours, or in 12 hours or so, it's going to be night. So he's going to have to go get down off of the horse in the armor and then somehow manage to get back up onto the horse the next morning. So there's all of these troubles that he has. It's like, okay, he totally hasn't thought this through. But he pointed out that the other knights of Bedivere had really useful armor. It was a long dress of mail, and it was split up the middle so it could sit on the horse, and the mail drapes down around the sides of the horse to protect it. And that's something that only weighs 40, 50 pounds. That's something that's manageable. And so Sir Bedivere could get up on the horse by himself. Sir Bedivere could get off of the horse by himself. And Sir Bedivere is pretty well protected from most things. He might have some trouble with arrows, but it'll stop a lot of arrows. It will hurt quite a bit if he gets hit by like a sword or something, but it won't cut into him. It might break a bone, but it won't cut into him. So he's fairly well protected, as opposed to the narrator, who is extremely well protected. But at the same time, if he turns turtle, falls on his back, he may not be able to get up. There's actually a story about a knight at, I can't remember which battle, it was during the 100 Years' War. So 100 Years' War, England and France fighting back and forth over bits of France. And there was a knight who fell off his horse, and he landed face down in a puddle. So here you have this guy with no actual wounds who ends up drowning in 2 inches of water because he is wearing so much metal he can't get himself up off the ground. So I don't know if that story is real or not, but I've heard it told enough times, it kind of feels real. So I don't know. As Mark Twain said, never let the truth get in the way of a good story.